called something else. In Singapore, it is something else. And even the duration of course matters, the work experience also matters. So I just start off in India. You don't need a work experience. And to get into the colleges like IIM or top tier 1 cities, you need to write CAT exam. That's basic for India, and you can just join. And if you do want to do after working, then you have 1 year course also. That's the executive course. Then when it comes to Europe, like UK and most of Europe, they have 1 year MBA course. They'll call it as PGDM or PGP or something, but it's literally the same 1 year. And so basically it's between 1 year and 2 years. And if you want to do a particular specialization, they will have it with that specialization as well. But when it comes to abroad, you need a work experience of 2 years for the basic diploma program and a minimum of 5 years for the executive program. Without that, they're not going to consider your resume. And without doing work experience and going to abroad also will not give you any advantage, because at the end of the day, they are going to look at the work experience. And if you want to have placement from those colleges, then it is absolutely mandatory, because let's say I finished my 1 semester of MBA, and I have found this issue, like as in since I'm being a fresher, there is already a constraint of what specialization I can do. Suppose if you want to do a finance, that's not going to work out, because in your class there will already be people who have already done their bachelor's in finance or already have their work experience in finance. And when it comes with that, you will have a big disadvantage with that. So if you guys have time, please do your work experience, do your internship, and work for some time before going into MBA. Doesn't matter, because a lot of university doesn't have work experience, and India is a place where the recruiters prefer freshers more than the experienced people. So in India, it doesn't matter, and that's the main reason why I wanted to do in India. So basically, if you can do it in India, and you don't need to have a work experience, but right from the start, try to see what specialization you want to go to. Because like let's say there is 4 or 5 specialization, and once your course is going to get over before you start, it's going to fly like that. So in between stage, you want to be committed in what you want to do. So going there and searching for what you want to do you'll take a lot of time from that, and that would affect your situation. So probably, if possible, start with your specialization now itself. And for abroad program, you need to have a GMAT score. And in European countries, most of them, they'll have scholarship. Without a doubt, they'll have scholarship. And in Germany and all, you'll get free education. So you shouldn't worry about tuition fees when it comes to European colleges, if I must add. And every other countries also have scholarship, but in European countries will have a slight advantage. And yeah, so CAT for India and GMAT for abroad. There are universities who consider GMAT for Indian colleges, but I still or Symbiosis who will have their own tests as well. And your preparation time should ideally be like 9 months before your test. So if you are in your final year, you should have been starting to prepare now itself, or you must appear for the test like in the next 5 months or something. So you should have already started with the process. If you're in the 3rd year, well and good, start to know what all tests there are and start preparing. So that is the one thing you absolutely need to get on right now, because the higher your score, the higher your chances of getting into a better university. So yeah.
So Varsha, I'll continue.
Yeah.
Okay, so Varsha spoke about MBA, and most of you mentioned in chat that you want to do MS in US. Well, me and Thiru, we got our admissions for MS in US. Like Varsha told about scores for MBA, for us it's necessarily not the case. See, you need GRE, you need IELTS or TOEFL, but they do not play the major role. Depending on each university, your profile will be evaluated in different ways. For example, I applied for CMU. In CMU, they were very, very specific to the depth in which the projects you've done. They did not care about your CGPA, and honestly, not many things. Basically, just your research experiences from what I thought. Whereas in Michigan, my overall profile was evaluated. Right from my diploma projects to my current projects to my athletics achievements to the magazines I published, everything was considered. So depending on the university, it will vary. I'll tell you the split up though. For universities in US, GRE and TOEFL nowadays most of it is waived because of the COVID situation. In certain most of the universities they are not asking. If they are asking, you can look about that in their website. So that is there. And then your score, your CGPA, which most likely will be converting into 4 because their CGPA grade scale is 4. That will probably contribute to some 30%. That's all. The major part of it comes from the SOP you're writing, how you're portraying yourself. You can even say, this happened, I did this, I did the entire research, the entire process in depth, and you can say that it failed. It doesn't matter if your result is, whether you achieved your result or not. All it matters is the effort you put in and the way you approach the problem and the way you're presenting. That's very, very important. They'll get lakhs and lakhs of applications for one seat. So they'll probably read your SOP for 3 minutes. Within the 3 minutes, you need to convince them that you're great. The efforts that you've put in that with your resources that you have, with the time you had, are perfectly justified for them to take you in their university. And then LOR plays a major role. LOR is letter of recommendation. Generally, if you have worked in a company, you can get the letter of recommendation from your head. And in our college, don't just like that choose HOD or any other faculty, your tutor or something like that. The professor under which you have done your projects, choose them and then get the letter of recommendations from them. To my knowledge, when a professor is submitting to a university, they'll be asked questions about what do you think, how good do you think the student is communicating, what is their participation in group discussion, like that. You will be evaluated in various terms. So SOP plays a huge role, followed by profile also. Major part of your profile should be dedicated to the projects you've done rather than the awards that you received. So these are my observations. Thiru, do you want to add something?
So going back to the research part, a few other points that I want to add is that when you search for universities, when you search for programs, the first thing you should keep in mind is do not search based on university rankings. That is the first major blunder that you can do when you're going for researching MS programs and whatever. You search based on the program strength and not the university strength. Because when you go abroad, it is not like in India how the universities are structured. When you go abroad, especially in the US, is that every university will have programs ranging from anthropological programs to engineering to medical to biosciences, etc., etc. So if you go simply based on university rankings, you will not get to know of the fact that that particular university specializes in, let's say, anthropology, but it does not specialize in engineering and technology. Therefore, the programs under engineering and technology will not be greatly funded, nor will the program quality be very good. So the first thing you need to keep in mind is that you search based on the program strength and how good the program is. And how do you do that? First thing, you simply go to their website. That's all you need to do. You have only 2 or 3 sources that I'll tell you right now, which is a basic thing where you'll almost get to know of everything. First thing is that you need to go to their website, the college website, through which you go to the program website or the department website, whichever to be the case, and you search for the kind of labs they have, the number of labs, the kind of labs, the projects that they're doing in these labs, and their location. For example, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor and Dearborn, both of them have masters in robotics programs. Both of them are situated near a big Ford industry. So the entire region of Michigan is surrounded around the automobile industry, especially Ford. So there, what happens is that automatically the research that goes on there will be slightly biased towards the automobile industry, where they'll be taking about research for let's say robots that take care of manufacturing and production of automobiles or anything, whatever it may be. So you need to look at where it is placed and the kind of people they have collaborations with, and more importantly, which is almost, I would say, the first priority would be the area of robotics in which they are performing research. Because you will have a particular interest. I mean, right now it is not a big issue. Right now it is just robotics masters that you want to do. But the thing is, the moment you get into a particular master's program, within say 2-3 months or so, you will have to decide on a particular field in which you want to specialize. Let's say vision for robotics, or navigation, or let's say hardware, let's say embedded systems for robotics, autonomous systems, anything. So each of these, every university will have a very good, let's say, a lab or something that produces excellent research in one of these fields. So you have to make sure that when you're researching and you're selecting universities, when you're shortlisting universities, you choose universities or you choose programs. Let's say, never choose universities. You choose programs that are that fit your needs. So yeah, so the criteria would be the study labs that they have, the projects, the vicinity to the industries, whatever they have, the area robotics they specialize in, and the kind of professors are available there. And one more thing is, please don't be narrow-minded and searching for simply MS in robotics or MA in robotics. Please don't do that. There are a lot of programs that are in reality just in practice and in reality just robotics programs named differently. For example, there are systems engineering programs, certain kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning programs, and programs that have come with the name of autonomous systems. So in Europe, especially in Scandinavian countries, I think Jayasuriya can talk on it. He's got in there where your programs are termed autonomous systems and so on. So ML and autonomous systems, blah, 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 blah. So these are also programs when you go, I mean, yeah. So when you want to know how will a program suit you, you simply go to the program website where they literally have all the courses that is being taught. So you go look into that, you will know whether it is a robotics program in essence or not. It is just that when you go for a robotics autonomous systems program, they specialize, or they focus on the control part, but it's still robotics. You're still going to apply it only in robots. So please make sure you can do that and check for all this. And so where do you go check for all this? Is what I've used is primarily 4 sources. One is the individual university website or whatever. The other is the best place where you can search for is called the QS World Rankings. I'll put it out in the chat. So that is where you can search. And for US specific universities, for people who are asking for masters in US, whether it be ME or MS, it is I forgot the entire name, but it's something called as US News or something, where they'll have a blue logo with some blue and red logo. It's quite a popular website. If you go, you can see that. And there's also the Times website, where they list out the rankings for all universities. But I would preferably go with QS World Rankings, where you search it through the kind of program, and not the university rankings. Yes, of course, it is necessary that you get into the top universities. So have a cutoff. Let's say the top 100 universities or the top 150 universities, under which I'm going to search each of those universities for programs that have robotics. For robotic programs, and each of those programs I'm going to shortlist. So I think this should be a good idea. Good flow for you to go through. And please don't ignore a university or ignore a program because the university in itself has a slightly lesser ranking. For example, I will tell you, I've gotten to University of Maryland. University of Maryland, when you see in QS World Rankings, the world ranking number is 105. The university's entire ranking. Whereas if you go check out your computer science, in terms of computer science, the research output and everything, they rank as somewhere under 11th in the world. So that is the amount of discrepancy that you can have. So please make sure you don't just go by the university ranking, but by going by the program strength and whatever. And next we can talk about SOP and everything. So for these, it will be very useful if you put in specific questions. However, I'll also give you my small general idea. The first thing is, and they told very importantly when they talk about doing small things and whatever. For third years, I think if somewhere you're around close to placements, if you started your CV, you would know you need something to put in 2 pages. Quite literally, if you have to speak, it will be very difficult for you when you sit at the end of your third year or somewhere, when you have to sit down and type out a CV. You need stuff to put on there. And please understand, for in terms of jobs, the way you prepare your CV is very different. So there, you might be able to fill up something for 2 pages, but when it comes to preparing a CV for applying for a program abroad, you literally need stuff to complete two entire pages on your MS Word, which will be very difficult. And also, please remember, they have font restrictions also. When you type your CV and when you type the SOP, they have font restrictions. So you cannot simply go about putting everything in. I'm telling this because you need to start thinking about this and start working. In essence, at the end of your third year, if you don't have stuff to put on your CV, you will start kind of being repetitive in your CV and your SOP. So we'll go about that next. So please make sure you start working on something, and especially for people in your second years and first years, I'm telling you, we are in a very good place in terms of being at PhD Tech for when you start doing a bachelor's, it has a very high reputation. So if you could put in good amount of effort, I'm telling you, you'll be able to easily get into good top quality PhD programs, which will come with funding, which will give you no hassle. All you have to do is go there and do your work. So please make sure that happens. And yeah. So, and again, one misconception or something that is different from India and abroad is that they don't look for, it has a small weightage, but they don't necessarily, just because a person A has an internship from Microsoft and person B has an internship from somewhere they don't know about, they don't give it, let's say, less weightage or whatever. In the end, what they care for or what they look for is how much that internship has helped you and how much you're able to portray it. A person with an internship from Microsoft can very easily, get rejected if he or she is not able to prove that during his internship in Microsoft, he's learned something good and he's being able to carry out good research. So that all depends on you. And for the LOR part, I strongly suggest, for almost all universities, I strongly suggest if you're going right after BE, please don't go for LORs from any kind of, let's say, managers or whatever from your job positions. They require and they prefer, in almost all cases, LORs from people in your university, in terms of your professors and people who have worked with in your college or university. So always make sure you have a good rapport with our staff and you engage in projects with them. Be it even the projects that we do as part of a coursework. That is quite well and good if your project is good and if you have done your good communication throughout your 6th semester and 7th semester when you do your mini projects as a separate thing. That is well and good, but you need to do a good work in that, and you need to have a good communication with them, so that in the end, when they have to write their LOS, when they're submitting LOS and stuff, they also know something to talk about you. They cannot simply say, because understand that wherever people, the kind of applications they'll get, if you look at from the people's point of view of people who are selecting you, they'll have the same application from 10 people. Let's say for a mark class, it's from your let's say for third year, who are in third year right now. If 3 of you are applying to the same university, and if you don't have a good individual, or if your teachers don't have an individual idea of who of you are individually, they can only give you a good certification as to you're good or you do well or you do whatever. Now, if that goes to the people who are sitting there and trying to select you, they won't see any difference in those 3 applications in terms of LOL. They'll only wonder as to who to select based on what. So unless and until they can talk about the specific project you did and the kind of impact it had on you, they may think like, this project is really good. So they will be able to come and work here in this particular project that we have, and therefore we will select them. That's the kind of thought process it goes. And the kind of standard way of selecting people for MS and ME abroad is that each of the people who are in the admissions committee, let's say, would be given 10 to 15 applications. What they do, each of those people, is that they shortlist. They take 1 or 2 applications out of this entire thing, and they will have to sit with all other people in the admissions committee and defend you. Literally, that's what happens. So you must be able to impress the person who's going to defend you. That is literally, let's say, it's kind of a court session where they will sit down and they'll discuss as to what are the advantages of the what are the profile qualities of the person he or she has selected with respect to the other people have selected. It's very important that you write your SOP in a very convincing way, and your LOS is very, very convincing in terms of establishing your qualities as a student, a researcher, and as a person who can take on challenges. And for when it comes to the exams part, I will tell you quite frankly that many people will find GRE tough, and almost all will find IELTS easy. Okay, so IELTS or TOEFL. IELTS is comparatively easy compared to TOEFL, but one of this is enough for your admissions. So I prefer, as long as the particular college hasn't mentioned that they prefer TOEFL, as long as I'll TOEFL, I'll prefer you submit IELTS scores, which IELTS score you can quite easily get, and you have to maximum do in preparation for 2 to 3 weeks, which in itself is very enough for you to get a good score. But when it comes to GRE, you need to sit and you need to toil for a very long number of months. I think one of the toughest part of going through your admissions process will be your doing your GRE, and the second one will be writing your own SOP in a very good way. So these are the primary two challenges that you will face. And when it comes to the timeline, after this we can talk about the SOP and LOR. When it comes to the timeline, the first, as far as I've researched and when I applied, the first deadline is by December 15th for Carnegie Mellon University. And that is the deadline, final deadline. Actually, by November 15, if I'm not wrong, by November 15, they have the deadline for early admissions. In the sense, you apply before November 15th. By November 15th, and by November 15th, you have a higher consideration. That I've seen only in CMU. To be frank, I've not seen it anywhere else for that early admission thing. But basically, their admission deadlines is by November 15 and December 15, followed by University of Michigan and almost all kinds of Scandinavian applications that come by January 15th or end of February. Scandinavian countries, major part of Europe, except Britain again, and US universities. The top universities done by Jan, at most by Feb. Especially very top universities, it's done by Jan. So you have to be ready with your applications by November, which means you need to have completed your GRE much before that. And one more problem that I didn't know, and I had a trouble, which was lucky for me, is that once you finish your GRE, let's say something is delayed, you're taking a GRE by sometime around November, it takes a certain amount of weeks, at least 2 weeks, for you to get your official score. You'll kind of get to know the score the moment your exam is done. It will come on the screen. But for you to get that report in your hand, it will take around 2 weeks or something. And after that, you have to place a request to the ETS company. ETS is basically the company that's giving GRE exams, to them to send your scores to the universities, which again takes, I could say it can also take at least to a month. So if people are telling the deadline in the university, if the deadline is December 15th, your GRE score has to reach them by December 15th, which means you should have submitted a request at ETS at least by November 15th. Now, for our batch, it was lucky that we didn't require GRE because of COVID and whatever. We still did take the exams. We still did submit it in some universities. And I'm not sure for this year, but I think GRE will be mandatory this year. So please make sure you take your GRE at the earliest by September, October. And for people who are thinking they are late, we'll come back to it later. And if you want to talk about this or anything, we both can add on, and then we can go into specifically into SOP and LOR.
Yeah, actually, we need to rush up because time is running. So, with the university selection that he told, what I want to add on is, when you're selecting universities based on the course ranking and not university ranking is one. Next, you have to check the percentage of people that get in. Like, for example, I think Michigan had like 23%. That means out of if 100 people are applying, only 23 people can get in. So that is one criteria you need to consider. The next thing you have to, that very, very important major key point is, if you're fixing on a university, if you like a lab in that, or if you really, really like the syllabus of that university, two things play a big role. First thing is, you need to check if you're eligible for that. They'll say, for our course, we need so and so criteria. You need to be, you need to have so much of this. You need to have this skill. Or for, there are certain, in CME itself, there's a course where you need to have 2 years of work experience. So first thing you need to check is the eligibility criteria. Are you eligible for that? They'll say, for max, I need so much of credits. They might say 3 credits, we might have 3 credits. But for them, 1 credit might be 6 hours, for us 1 credit might be 3 years. Like that difference is also there. That also you have to check in detail. So first, check the eligibility criteria. Second, if you like a university, if you like a course, go through all of the professor's area of interest and which professor's area of interest match you. that particular professor you need to mention in your SOP, telling I also wish to work here. This professor is also working here. In this so and so works I've done. He says his area of interest is this, and I've seen his papers. He's done so and so. So I think it will be very useful for you as well as for me. We can both of us will be benefited, like that you have to say. So that is second major thing. Third thing is, the fund we already spoke about, right? So the university ranking, their acceptance rate, and your eligibility criteria, and if your area of interest truly matches with them. If you're having an excellent profile and if there is no professor there to guide you, they will not take you. So please make sure to check that. And one more, two things that nobody spoke about till now is that if you're doing any community service, like for example, I worked in an NGO called MAD, Make a Difference, which is actually highly valued by the people there. Apart from this academics, apart from this sports, all the state medals, all South India medals, apart from that, just the fact that I was committed to a group of kids for 1 year, who are kids in need, that also matters. So if you do any small community service also, please make note of that. It contributes to your humanity as well as it plays a big role in your profile. That is something nobody mentioned. So that is something you know. As far as one question that was often asked to me by my immediate juniors was, Akka, I want to specialize in robotics. I don't know what to do in robotics. I mean, if we take Michigan, they've separated robotics into 3 categories: sensing, reasoning, and control. Sensing deals all with the sensor part. Control deals with control system. Reasoning deals with the AI ML part. So now you have a rough idea about it. If you go to Michigan's website, you can see a clear definition between sensing, reasoning, and control. Please go through that. Please check. Decide what you want to work on and then proceed in that. It doesn't matter if you do 4 projects or 1 project. All it matters in that, in what you've done, how much do you truly know? That is what is being checked at the end, be it placements or higher studies. In your project, are you thorough? Are you 100% thorough? Do you have any future scope for that? Why did you choose that? So that is one of the important things. Do you people want to add? Because I have a few more points to tell.
No, you finished. I'll add after that.
Okay. So, and one more thing is, I am from a diploma background. After 10th, I did my diploma. I don't know how many lateral entry students are here. Is there anybody? Just give a heads up. If nobody is there, there's no reason talking about that. Just unmute and say I'm there or something. So I guess nobody, then no problem. So one common observation I have in masters is, whatever you do, wherever you go, I want to pursue research or product development, you can say that. First, what they'll do is, whatever problem statement you have, they will first mathematically model it. They'll simulate the answer for it. Then only they'll try to implement it. So wherever you go, underlyingly mathematics is very, 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 very important. Linear algebra, vector space algebra is and probability and statistics. They are what is widely used in terms of robotics alone. If you go to this robotic arm manipulators, all your inverse kinematics, blah blah blah, partial difference calculus will play a role. Whereas if you come to autonomous mobile robots, that is a different thing. But basically, maths is very, very important. Please be strong on your maths. Like for few Sweden universities and all, they were like, technical we want only so much, computer science we want only so much credits. But for maths, the number of credits that they wanted was really, really high in number, which we were not eligible for. So I would suggest you, if you're in second year or third year, take math electives. Like there's graph theory and applications, there is operations research, there is advanced linear algebra. So please take maths electives. That is one more point I want to make. So yeah, you people can continue, Alar, if I have anything.
Yeah, I just saw the chat. So there are people with MBA in India and MIM in Germany. First MBA in India. I hope that you have already started with your CAT preparation. So you need to give I gave CAT and XAT. So it usually is CAT, XAT, SNAP, and NMET. So these are the exams that you need to take. But CAT is the main thing. And second is about early admission, that I want to counter to Thiru's point, because I believe early admission is preferred. why I'm saying is that when I started for MBA, early admission is like you can apply before your scores come out. So that time the major mistake what I did was I limited myself. Like I thought I wouldn't get that score. So if I get, apply for that college is what I had in mind, and that was the major mistake that I did. Because if I had applied in early admission, I would have stood a better chance. Even though I cleared in the second round, if I had it in the early admission, I would have had the easier process. Because even if you don't get selected in that early admission, you can apply to other colleges later. So I believe that you should start applying early, and if scenarios happen, and you can alternately decide upon it. And the third, about MIM, this is a very, very personal opinion, but I believe that if you want to change your stream, just commit to it. Either take MS or take MBA. MIM is not going to do anything, because during the whole 2 years, you're going to study basics about management and basics about your industry or engineering or something, and that's not going to get you any use. So just commit. If you're going to change stream, it is fine. Commit, do MBA. You can still work in the tech field after that. That is upon your interest and what you're doing. So that doesn't matter, but just commit to that. Then I want to say that keep your mind and options open. So about the ranking things, that thing is absolutely right. Because if you want to see rankings, my university won't come under Indian ranking and won't come under international ranking, because it is like an exchange program. So basically, you need to keep your mind open, and you need to start talking with a lot of people to understand what all opportunities are there. So obviously keep your mind open and research about college. That is how you will know what all course they offer, and you might actually find something that you really love. Even if it's not there in the rankings, you will find that university, that I'm sure. And regardless of MBA and MS, I want to say that start your LinkedIn account if you haven't already. That is where you can start connecting with people. You can start gaining internship opportunities, live projects and everything. That is how you will actually start connecting with your industry and gain experience. So start with your LinkedIn account now itself, because it's very, very helpful. Even if you want an internship or job opportunity apart from what college is offering, it will be really helpful. Then whatever hobby that you have, let's say I had photography or something, and don't just keep it as a hobby. So because whenever you want to put it out in an interview, or if you want to put it as a SOP, you need to write something what you have done with your hobby. So even like I was a cinematographer in a college club or in our association, I can write that because like I had a hobby in photography, I did so and so in that area. So don't keep your hobbies as just hobbies to write down. Do something with that. Like I had a baking business last year, and that plays a huge role when I told, because during my initial interviews I never mentioned it, and after that when I mentioned, people were a little like curious about what I actually did, and that time I had time to tell out about me. So don't keep your hobbies as hobbies. Do something with that. Do something, even if that is small, that will help you. And about the MAD or community service, that is going to help a lot. Not only in US, even in Indian universities, you need to do some sort of NGO kind of service. So that is important. You keep it as a mandatory thing that you are doing something that will improve yourself also, and you will find a lot of connections as well. So start doing some sort of service. That will be great. So that's it from me.
Okay, like I had a point. As Nibhat, Varsha covered the main points, I'd like to cover some of the minor points, like your living expenses and working part time when you go for higher studies. So let us. This is more related when you want to like save funds after you get admission as particular university. So in Germany, you don't have tuition fees, but major living expenses, health insurance, and your rent. Both extremely expensive. Food costs are going to be higher than India. Similarly, in US, you also have a very high living cost of living in some cities. For example, University of Michigan is relatively affordable compared to going to university in New York or in a specific university. So also factor in living costs when you look for university. If you're like feeling that might not be able to afford the fees, as an embassy you can take a loan, but your living expenses also makes a major chunk of your expenses. For Germany, it's around 20 lakhs for 2 years for your master's program. 10 lakhs per year, including food, health, your transportation, and all those stuff. And also part-time, we have restrictions for international students. In US, it's 20 hours per week. You can work either, usually you can work only in the university stuff. In other countries, you can work for part-time for internships in a company which the university has approved. So keep a note when you look for university that if you want to work part-time, also look at these factors. That's all I want to add.
Yeah, so about that working thing, there are many universities and programs that offer something called this for the technical programs. There is often something called as co-ops. Co-op is where it is basically like what we do here for the 8th semester, where we work in a particular company or a particular system where you can actually, they have tie-up with great companies where you can work not just for the last semester, but for a long period of your master's, and that will, add on to your program. So you can look for programs that, that offer co-ops also. So that will give you directly a way to get into the top industries that you are looking to look into. And coming to the SOPs, let's keep it short, but the primary things that you need to follow is that first thing, you have to be yourself. Please don't make anybody else write your SOP in any way, shape or form. It is completely unethical, and also it will not serve you well, because please understand that people who are sitting there in the admissions committee have been sitting there at least for 10 plus years, and they can differentiate between a person who's writing the SOP for the first time and the person who's going to write the SOP for the nth time. And the primary thing, as far as this is a personal opinion, as far as they will look into it, how will they identify is the first thing, they will look for mistakes. If there is no mistakes in your SOP, that is when they will worry. So please don't think, this is a personal opinion. I am not sure of this. I have no backing for this anyways. Please don't think that making mistakes is a wrong thing. Just don't make blunted mistakes, and that you do by sitting and reviewing. And this is the basic process of, even if you go for news articles and whatever, there are something called as editors, and there's something called as writers. Writers write and editors edit. So as long as you play both the roles, and you can take a small amount of help for getting your SOP edited, but do not make anybody write it. So that's a very major point that I want to tell you.
And one more thing about SOP, they will defend you only if they can see that you're unique. If you're copying somebody else's SOP, it's not very difficult for them to differentiate. Second thing is, you're not unique. They do not want you because there are many people like you. They only want to take the people who they think will contribute to their universities. Always keep that in mind.
And one tip I can give you for that is, do not look at a sample SOP the first step before you start writing. Don't do that. Actually, I think that will contribute in a very negative way, because people who've studied machine learning will it will automatically introduce a bias into what you're doing. So my advice would be to first sit down, write 2 pages. Your SOP can anywhere range based on individual universities from 500 words to 1,500 words, which is approximately 2 pages. So it can range from half a page in a normal A4 word sheet, from half a page to 2 pages. And most cases it is either 2 pages or 1 page. So that is the criteria they have, and it does not necessarily have to be on point. But as long as it's less than 2 pages, they won't worry. So my advice would be, sit down, write your SOP first. Just write whatever comes to mind. Sit on it for a week or so and edit it. After you finish writing, edit it, sit on it for a week or so. Then you go to your sample SOPs. Then you see what are the things they have done or have not done, what you have done. Then edit it accordingly. So I think this would be a better way to go about it. Sit down and write your SOP, then look at sample SOPs, all these news articles and web articles that say how to write your SOP and whatever, and then to tune it accordingly. And people who are interested in machine learning, this is a concept called transfer learning, where you change only the last part of your network and not the complete thing. So do not look at sample SOPs to start with. As long as what you need to know is SOP is an essay. Okay, it's a statement of purpose, it's an essay. You have to sit down and write an essay about yourself. That's all. It's quite simple. So, and what you need to mention in that essay, before that, one thing I'll tell you, what you should not mention is to repeat your CV. So please make sure you don't just write what is in your CV again. They know, they can see, they have your CV, they can see what you have done, whatever and whatever. So if you're going to say in the SOP again, I've done this project, I did this project, I got this award, it's not going to help. It's not going to help because it's a copy. They already know it from your CV. So what that SOP should contain that is not there in the CV is that what you learned from doing what you did. Here you have a CV which tells whatever you did. Your SOP should show what you learned from it and what you gained out of it and what you want to do using it in the future. All right. A simple example, I did a project on computer vision to track objects. That's it. This is what your SOP will say. I've done a project on the object tracking using computer vision. What your SOP should say is, I tried. It should be purely technical. Please understand that it should be purely technical. I did so and so using this particular thing. The problems I faced, the difficulties I had, technical words. You need to use jargon. It's called jargon in SOP terms. It's called jargon. You need to have technical jargon in your SOP, but not too much, not too little. Always make sure that it is in the perfect amount. It should not be completely technical, because the people who are sitting in the admissions committee, not everyone will be, proper professors who can understand what you're saying. Because even if they're your robotics professors who are sitting in the admissions committee, they might be specializing in some kind of, let's say, mechanical elements of robots. Okay, and you'll be writing about an electrical project that you did or a computer science project that you did. So it's not necessary that they will understand it. So please make sure you include enough jargon to make them understand that you know stuff. At the same time, you don't confuse them and you don't take them out of the loop. So tell, this was the stuff I did. I faced these technical problems. I used so and so to solve it, and therefore I gained these kinds of experiences. And I'm trying to make sure I apply it in this way when I'm coming to your university. So that is the primary thing about SOPs. It's a standard structure. You give an introduction, you talk all about your projects, your extracurriculars, blah, blah, blah. Everywhere you don't just repeat what you said in your CV, rather